The sun was only just beginning to set as I arrived. Artie's All-American Arena was located on the same block as Vernon's preferred liquor store. Before, the grounds housed a ShopRite and a large parking lot. But now, against a slightly smaller lot, there's a large gray coliseum about 3 stories tall. Although I couldn't see it all from the street, I estimated it was about the width of a football stadium. The parking lot was almost full. As I drove through, looking for a spot, I noticed a golden archway in front of the giant stadium. Beneath it was a large black door. A handful of slim and yet muscular men stood in front of it, eyeing the parking lot suspiciously. I watched a teenage kid hand them cash and take out a loaf of bread. They nodded and opened the doors. From inside, I heard cheering. I finally found a space a few rows from the entrance and got out of my car. Without looking, I almost ran into an older woman and presumably her husband. The woman had her twig hands on her hips and glared at me as I staggered by. "Is she one of the horrors you waste food on, you stupid asshole?" she asked her husband, who was leaning against his minivan. "Let's just go home," he said. "No, come on, let's watch. I want to see what's so entertaining for you." The two of them charged ahead of me, the woman dragging her husband along like a disobedient child. They walked up to the muscular men and pulled out 2 20s. "We have 2 Kanoko bars," said the woman. "Let us in." She opened up her purse and let the guard standing in front look inside. The guard shook his head. "We don't take those anymore." He had a surprisingly high-pitched voice. "Are you serious?" the woman grumbled. "Sorry, ma'am. New rules. We've gotten too many complaints." The woman huffed again and turned to her husband, who seemed relieved. After scowling at the guards and then me, she walked away with her hands across her chest. Her husband followed obediently. Confused and nervous, I approached the guards. Here," I said, handing them my $20. "And, I brought some gum." I awkwardly held it up. "You have an ID?" the guard asked. I have my driver's license." I handed it to him. He nodded and the guard stepped aside. As I walked through them, I tried not to look at their faces. I knew they were staring at me. Now, I was never the prettiest girl, but the reality is, no matter how you look, men, especially older men, will stare. I looked down at their feet. Each wore steel-toed boots with jeans tucked in. I opened the door. Inside, I was engulfed in several rows of bleachers, stretching to the top and circling around the stadium. The seats were about half full, with large groups huddled in them. A few sat alone, wearing baseball caps, practically shrinking away from the others. There were about 2 women for every 10 men. The crowd ranged in age from teenagers to the elderly, but the vast majority fell in the younger end of middle age. Not, of course, that the ages were obvious. Everyone's skin dripped from their face, and they moved slowly. Some of the skinniest men were hunched over, holding onto their knees for support. Anyone with a little bit of energy left spent it laughing, howling, and chucking food at the platform below. I couldn't see what they were watching until I stood against the fence and stared below. What I saw just a few feet below terrified me, preventing me from leaving my spot. I stood there for almost a minute before an older man bumped into me and yelled at me to find a seat. A chubby woman sat in the middle of the concrete, several feet below ground level, wearing nothing but a bikini top and Daisy Duke shorts. Audience members aimed food at her face. A few people threw crumpled dollar bills. When something hit her, the audience screamed in delight. There was food scattered all around her. Several broken apples to her left, slices of cheese to her right, and loaves of bread scattered throughout. They covered almost the entire stadium. The smell was overwhelming, like I'd stuck my head in a dirty trash bin. I couldn't imagine what the woman smelled as she crawled across the floor, devouring as much as she could, heaving handfuls of food into her mouth. Her body was covered in sweat and crumbs. What she couldn't stuff in her mouth dribbled on the floor, only for her to with shaking fingers, grab and push back against her outstretched lips. Every few seconds, she stopped to cough or swallow, which earned laughter from the stadium above. She looked up, not at me, but in my direction, and I noticed her mascara running. She was crying. The man who bumped into me was likely old enough to be my father. As he passed me, his hand grabbed my lower thigh, squeezing hard enough for his chopstick fingers to dig deeply into my flesh. I instinctively bolted towards the bleachers, easily finding a seat a few feet away from 3 older men who stared at me conspicuously before turning their attention back to the show. As the girl in front of us crawled and cried, I scanned the rows for crumbs thrown too weakly to reach the platform. Within a minute, a few noodles, covered in hair, landed beside me. I hesitated, but my hunger overpowered my disgust. I grabbed the noodles and stuffed them into my mouth. The hair stuck to my teeth. I pulled the strands out as best I could. There were some other fruits on the rows above me. I swept them into my purse. Awkwardly, I climbed to the next level, discreetly scanning for food. As my hunt continued, a part of me wanted to crawl like the girl. But I knew better. I had to be inconspicuous. I found a peach, looked around, and began to eat it. I tried to cover my face with my hair, but apparently my attempts at discretion failed. A few men noticed me and laughed. I stuffed the peach into my purse. Unfortunately, the men had begun to whisper to the group sitting below them. They too turned to stare. They reached out to grab me, weakly pawing at my skin and laughing. Soon I had grown my own miniature audience of about 5 or 6. "Hungry bitch!" Someone howled at me. He threw an Oreo at my head. A few others followed suit. Soon I was covered. Carrots, broccoli, potato chips. A half-eaten pizza slice landed on my shoe. I tried to shield myself, but they wouldn't stop throwing. I tried to stand up, but hands behind me held me down. One of the men sitting next to me reached across my lap, grabbed the slice, and shoved it into my face. It blocked my nose and mouth so I couldn't breathe. There were so many men, I couldn't do anything to fight. I swallowed the pizza in 2 bites. Another person threw an orange. It landed on my head and bounced down to the floor. I covered my face in my lap and squeezed my legs. Some weak hands attempted to pull me upright, but quickly they grew tired. Giving up, they stopped and simply covered me in whatever they had brought with them. Ham slices slapped my arms. A half-melted chocolate bar smacked my legs. I didn't care. I stayed curled up in my ball. These were not people taunting. They were zombies, tossing gunk at me not for entertainment, but because they had no control of their bodies. A loud gunshot erupted. "I'd like to remind everyone that food is for entertainment only," a deep voice said from my left below the bleachers. I looked down. A handful of what I can only imagine to be yogurt dripped from my bangs. One of the muscular security guards stood before me. He had his gun pointed at our section. "Please refrain from feeding guests." A low muttering of annoyance, as well as some grunts of agreement, echoed around me. I tried desperately to get the gunk off me, although most of the attention had migrated to the main show. A few men were still staring and laughing at my pathetic attempts to clean myself. As I squeezed the yogurt out of my hair and brushed the crumbs from my skin, I felt the ache of embarrassment, stronger even than hunger. I was full, and I felt disgusting. Someone tapped me on the shoulder. An older woman, thin but not obviously malnourished, smiled at me. "Come with me, honey," she said. "Let's clean you up and find somewhere else to sit." She handed me a towel, which I quickly used to wipe as much of myself as I could reach. Some of the more slippery sauces had gotten below my jeans and t-shirt, but I didn't feel comfortable sliding my hands underneath the fabric. The woman reached out, and I caught her hands in mine. Steadying myself, I stood up and followed her. We walked together off the bleachers, earning some annoyed shouts and grumbling. We walked along the ground floor against the fence separating us from the woman, who was deep on the pavement below, continuing her consumption. Had I looked so pathetic? Had I gagged as she did? No, I wasn't that bad, I assumed. I hoped I had maintained some semblance of dignity. You have to be subtle if you want to eat here, the woman explained. Just sit down in one place for long enough, and someone will happen to throw something in your direction, usually by accident. You don't run around desperately, making a huge spectacle. I'm sorry, I said as we sat in the middle row, deep within the stadium. No one around had seen my groveling, but my presence earned some stares regardless. The woman glared at them until they looked away. This is my first time. She laughed. Obviously. A grape landed next to her, and the old lady, very casually, picked it up and plopped it in her mouth. See? That's how you do it. So that's why you're here? I asked. To eat? I couldn't imagine this sweet old lady getting much entertainment from watching the girl wriggling below us. She wasn't even looking down. Instead, she looked to her right, smiling slightly. No, honey, no. My son comes here every day. She frowned. It's the only time I get to see him. He doesn't even know I'm here. We lost touch. He comes here every day, she repeated. He's quit his job. He won't get help. What can I do? She turned to me suddenly. What can I do, right? I nodded. It's a hard situation, I said. Somehow this was enough to satiate her. You see that girl down there? She pointed to the girl who had, after presumably noticing the crowd thinning out slightly, began to roll around in the filth. From where we sat, I noticed that some of the slop around her wasn't sauce, like I initially thought. It was vomit. I nodded and tried not to look at the show. A chocolate chip landed on the row below me, and I scooped it up, stuffing it into my purse as she spoke. I used to teach her back in elementary school. She was one of the smarter kids, loved helping out. She told me she wanted to be a nurse. Can't she still become a nurse? I asked. The woman laughed without her reaching her eyes. After this, probably not. She'll probably do a few more years of feeding and then retire comfortably. I heard the pay's nice. Oh. We sat silently, listening to the roars of the crowd and picking up bits of food that fell beside us. Due to the increasing darkness of dusk, harsh fluorescent lights have been turned on. They shine above us, illuminating the crowd. As I stared at the desperate onlookers, I couldn't understand why they threw their food when so many of them looked on the brink of death. Another thought struck me as well. Despite the obvious hunger, everyone was relatively well dressed and drove the same cars I'd seen that morning. I hadn't seen any for sale signs on houses and businesses, except for restaurants. Clearly, hunger was a price most were willing to pay for luxury. I thought of myself and the skipped meals, and then I understood. A chant rang out, starting from somewhere to my left. No hands! No hands! I didn't understand until I saw the girl get back on her knees and hold her hands behind her head. She then began to inch around the stadium, her face buried deep into the morsels and into the cement. She dragged herself with surprising speed, only looking up to catch her breath. Blood poured from her chin and onto the cement, and food covered her face and hair. The woman next to me shook her head, but even she was smiling. The crowd clapped furiously. Then the girl began to make a pile of whatever she could find. Mashed potatoes, half-eaten fruit. Like a child leaping into a pile of leaves. She jumped into it. But there wasn't enough cushioning. She landed on her leg and it bent in the wrong direction. She screamed. Most of the crowd cheered, although some of them beside me seemed concerned. It happens like this, the woman told me. The more pain they go through, the better the reviews. Some of them even pull out their own teeth. This one's a newbie. She's testing the waters. Trying to sit up gracefully, but ultimately failing, the girl stuck her fingers down her throat. She gagged, tried again, and gagged again. The crowd was quiet, waiting. Ultimately, she was successful. It surrounded her like a marsh. Again, she attempted, and again, she was successful. Claps from the audience seemed to propel her, and soon, the stink was strong and distinct. She spewed in circles. Her eyes were hidden under her hair. I think she was trying to look away. Clumps of dollar bills flew from random directions, most of them landing in the puddles. Reaching into my purse, I took out my gum and threw it, attempting to aim at her. Instead, it landed several feet away, on top of some Ravaged hot dog buns. If I stayed any longer, I too would vomit. I don't think gum's gonna help much, said the old woman. She laughed. I have to go, I told her. But thank you for helping. Stay safe out there, sweetie. It's not worth it. She looked me in the eyes for several seconds, biting her lip. This place, it's worse than a casino. The more you hate yourself, the harder it is to look away. I really wish I could. She added so quietly that I may have imagined it. I jogged out of the arena, ignoring whatever they threw at me. As the girl continued to vomit, the crowd grew rowdier. A few of the men who had covered me in food started a weekly jog after me. The guards yelled at them. Some didn't care and continued until the guard took out his gun. Some simply reached out from the bleachers with grimy, long, thin fingers. As I was about to open the door, an older man jumped on top of me, knocking me down to the floor. He straddled me, laying his chest against mine and grabbing beneath my head. I couldn't shake him off, so I lay there, trying not to cry because I knew crying would only make him more aggressive. He fondled my belly with an outstretched palm until a guard ran up to him and pulled him off. I turned away as he kicked the man repeatedly in the face. There was discord all over the arena. Some men were grabbing at each other's wives, which prompted angry exchanges of fists and yelling. Others were taking off their clothes and aiming them at the platform. They landed instead on other audience members, which again prompted more fists and more yelling. More guards rushed in. They held up their guns and shot warning shots. At least I think there were warning shots. I was too focused on the door and leaving to confirm. I swam through the swarm of guards, nearly getting shoved over until I was several feet from the entrance. I panted, trying to catch my breath. They get like that at the end, but they calm down quickly, said a voice behind me. I turned around to see a middle-aged man. He wore a simple button-up shirt, tucked into jeans. His hair, while admittedly a bit greasy, was combed nicely and parted to his left. His gray face was dominated by a broad smile. He was thin, but not in the same way as the others. Not like the others, with their skin stretched tightly over their bones. I immediately distrusted him. It's the first time, right? He asked. I didn't answer. He chuckled. Look, I'm going to be upfront. I saw what you did there, and I think you have a talent for this type of thing. I'm going to give you my business card. No pressure, but if you're ever in need of some easy cash... I don't want your card. The man's smile faltered slightly. You know you can get fined for eating food meant for entertainers? We had a lot of your type before. We had to go to the city council. It was a huge thing. Of course, we don't really enforce it often. Still, I'd take the card if I was you. He handed me his business card. Chester N. Talent Acquisition. I'm not going to call this, I said. He chuckled again. Almost everyone does. Sometimes they wait until they're hungry enough to be desperate. By then, we usually don't want them. Too skinny. I didn't respond. I just headed to my car. When I got in, I sat in silence for a while, doom scrolling through my phone. As I prepared to leave for my mother's, I noticed the man was still there by the entrance. He was talking to someone. I brushed up against the window for a better look. It was definitely Lewis from the gas station. I recognized him almost immediately, but had nothing to say to either of them.